Thank you, Chair. Can I ask Bishop Jones if we can look further at your recommendations and perhaps move you on to another obligation under Article 2, but specifically in the report you recommended the creation of an independent public advocate. Meanwhile, you'll know that the Victims and Prisoners Bill appears to act on that recommendation. Is it what you proposed? Does it go far enough? And in the aftermath of these terrible tragedies, will it actually help to protect people's human rights, to enforce those human rights, and having particular regard to the obligations set out in the defining article of the European Convention on Human Rights, Article 2, the right to life itself, will it ensure effective investigations?
Thank you. It wasn't part of our 25 points of learning, but you're right that in the report, I did welcome the proposal to establish an IPA. My concern about what is in the bill before Parliament at the moment is that it does not go far enough, because it does not propose that there should be a standing independent public advocate. And my own experience and observation is that it's in the immediate aftermath of a public tragedy, when people are disorientated, grief-stricken, bereaved, traumatized. It's in that very moment that they need an independent public advocate. And to wait for 2 weeks or 2 months for the Secretary of State to work out whether or not the public tragedy merits an IPA, I think overlooks the pressing need in the immediate aftermath of there being an advocate for those who've been affected. And actually it goes back to the duty of candour and the false narrative points that we've been looking at, because as with Hillsborough, it was in the immediate aftermath that the false narrative emerged about blaming the fans. And if there was an IPA, one of the functions of the IPA could well be to challenge any false narrative that emerged. So, yes, there should be an IPA, but it needs to be a standing appointment. Otherwise, I'm afraid, it's not an independent public advocate, it's just a public advocate.
Thank you. If I can query a little bit deeper, if I may, Chair, on that, because, of course, Mr Abrahamson reminded us about the false narratives before and the lack of independent advice and help and support that was being given to the people who were directly affected. Now, the Victims and Prisoners Bill would make a key function of the independent public advocate a duty to ensure that bereaved families are informed about sources of support and advice, enabling access to documents and information connected with any inquest or inquiry. I wonder if that fully meets your own report's recommendations, either in the direct recommendations or in the observations that you make in the report itself. And certainly from my own recollections, I visited every family that was directly affected by Hillsborough, including families with children who had died at Hillsborough, which for me was one of the most heartbreaking experiences of my life, but I could not believe the absence of any official help that was being given to anyone at that time. So does that not demonstrate why the government are right to do this, but will it go far enough? Does it do the things that you think are needed?
I'm entirely with you from your own experience, and I think the IPA should be there to protect the human rights of those who are affected by a public tragedy. And I'm surprised that that's not actually on the face of the bill as far as I've read it. That's the explicit purpose of an IPA, to protect those rights. I think, too, that what the IPA could and should do would be to instruct all agencies to keep and not to destroy any emails or documents so that they can become subject to later scrutiny. I think also the IPA could have a role in advising the government on setting up an appropriate inquiry or panel. They could advise on the terms of reference, having listened to the families and engaged with them, so that the inquiry or panel really did address the issues that concerned the bereaved. And I think, too, that after the event, the IPA could have a role scrutinising whether lessons have been learnt and embedded across government, because at the moment there is no public official who's given charge to do that?
I think particularly picking up, if I may finally, the point you've just made about ensuring that evidence and material that is germane is not destroyed in order to cover tracks. I mean, I personally had written to the Sports Minister before the game, sending correspondence from a constituent worried about the safety of the ground at Hillsborough, and pinning that down subsequently. I mean, it took a parliamentary question and an admission that the letter actually existed and that it had happened. And I think what you're saying is that there should be an advocate there to ensure that nothing is suppressed, that the narrative isn't changed, and the material that would be germane to bringing out the truth and justice will not be in short supply.
Absolutely, because what our report is saying is there needs to be a change of culture as well as a change in the law. And the change in culture is about being transparent and candid, dealing with people honestly. And that's why one of the 3 principal points of learning in the report is a charter for those bereaved through public tragedy. And one of the key principles of the charter is that you do not put protecting your own reputation over and above the rights, interests and needs of those who have suffered. So going back to that earlier discussion about candour, it's changing the culture as well as changing the law.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all that you and our other witnesses here today have been doing. I hugely respect that.